Hi, I'm Markus Zusak, and I'm the author of La Ladrona de Libros and El Puente de Clay. And I've had the best time talking to the team here at Gandhi and in Guadalajara. And you don't really have to buy this book. You know, there are lots of good books in the world, but if you choose this one, what you know is that every word was deliberate and it comes from my heart. So thank you very much for having me. I think, especially the book Thief. It's interesting because that's what I grew up hearing stories of my parents growing up in Germany and Austria, and during World War II and afterwards, and so these stories were very natural to me, and it was also kind of the story of my childhood. Was hearing the stories of their childhood, and so what it gave me was this idea that we all start becoming who we are long before we're even born, you know, and these stories are already inside us, ready to come out. And so I'm not sure I think too much about the generational side of things, but for me, it's just this idea that what we're made of is stories. And whether you're old or young, stories are still what we're made of.
Yeah, that's true. In a sense, there's a certain homage to Homer, and it looks like a great epic story could be stated in the kitchen or in the backyard, and not only within the grandiloquent of those epic stories of the past. There is a wink to Homer. Is that right?
Yeah. What I started with originally was this family and these boys, and what I realised was that I gave them all nicknames.
Yeah.
You know, every boy has a nickname in the family, and there are 5 of them. And then they're training at the athletics track, and all the other boys have nicknames. And I thought, oh, this is a little bit like Homer, where it's never just Achilles; it's always the fast-running Achilles, or it's the resourceful Odysseus, and so on. And so I just thought, oh, this is interesting that there's this connection. And then when I thought of a nickname for their mum, the mistake maker, and then I wrote this sentence that she came from a watery wilderness, and I knew that this came straight out of Homer. And so I thought that's what I'm actually trying to do, is what you were talking about, you know, being in the kitchen or the backyard, that we all think we live these small, dull lives, but we all have big moments in our lives. We all fall in love. We all have people we love die on us, you know, and we have big arguments in the kitchen sometimes. And so I wanted to celebrate these big moments. I think you can never wish sort of success away. You can never say, oh, if only I hadn't sold all those books, or if I hadn't won whatever awards. But I think what happens is it does actually create more fear in your writing, and depending on your personality. In my case, I sort of thought, you start to think, okay, now I have to try to do that again. Or you think, the problem is the more people who love you, your book goes further out into the world, and then you're going to find the more people who don't love you. And they're more than happy to tell you that they don't love you. Especially today with things like social media, and everyone has, it's almost like you don't have an opinion unless you've told everybody that opinion. And so I think there's all this noise, a lot of noise, and then what happens is I think the noise actually goes, you know, slowly whittles away until then it's just you, and it's like this tunnel that you're writing your book, and then you're just not worried about any of that. You're trying to do what's right for the book. And I think the truth is actually that I think Bridge of Clay would have taken this long anyway, because it was a very difficult book, and it had a lot of characters in it. It was, you know, my most ambitious book. So, and it was always the book I was most worried about, you know, and afraid of. So I'm hoping that next time around I can just, next year I'm home most of the year. So 2020 is the year of writing a book at home. So that would be nice. Yeah, well, it's actually takes till the very end of the first part of the book for Clay to say something.
Yeah.
And he said, and there are 8 parts in the book, and so for the first 60 pages or 70 pages, he hasn't said anything. And his first words in the book are, "Hi, Dad," and this is where we get actually, even though I think it's clear in some ways who this person is who's come into their house and who's been away for a long time, but it's their father, and so that silence is actually kind of, I guess, withholding. You already know what sort of character Clay is. He's not going to speak unless he really has to. But at the same time, he was once the child in the family of 5 brothers who loved his parents' stories the most. And so I think his silence is actually a wound. And his silence is like the most readily seen wound by the reader, that Clay has experienced something that his other brothers have not. And we come, to the final revelation towards the end of the book. And I think I always felt a little bit like that in school, when I didn't speak that much, but if I had to do a speech, then I would say, right, now I'm going to do a good job. So it's interesting what little pieces of yourself you put into your characters as well.
Yeah.
I think, actually, it's a great question. And actually, I actually always feel quite empathetic to Michael. I don't. Well, even though Matthew, as the narrator, is very harsh on their father for leaving the family, I always feel, and Clay too is very hard on him when he goes to see him, and they talk about, and even their sentences together and their dialogue is very short, and sometimes, like the example I can think of is when he goes to build the bridge with his dad out on his property, and his dad says, "Thank you, thanks for coming," and Clay says, "I didn't come here for you."
Yeah.
But he did, yes. And he came there for the whole family, really, and also for himself, and to try to make this one beautiful thing, which is the bridge. But I like to think that there is an empathetic door open to Michael, and I think if Matthew even says towards the end of the book that he understands why he left, and I think there are all these it's a book of clues, yes, all the time, and so I think there is a clue there that Matthew has forgiven their father, and if Matthew can forgive them, maybe all of them can. I think I've always loved films and cinema, and I've always loved that part of things. But so I guess I think actually Bridge of Clay is the kind of book that would almost be easier to tell as a film, because if you look at the first part of the book in a film, that first part could be the first 3 minutes. Or just like seeing Clay doing what he's doing, and but at least 5 minutes. Whereas in a book, it takes 60 pages, to get all of what's happening and to see every part of the city and to see what's happening inside the house and everything. Whereas I think in a film, so I can see it being, done in a filmic kind of way. At the moment, it doesn't look like it's not signed up for a film or anything, but it's interesting. I mean, the book that I wrote before The Book Thief, back in 2002, so 17 years ago, finally I just signed that up to be possibly made into a TV series back home in Australia, and so it might take 17 years, but you hope that the life of the book is long, and actually you don't know what's going to happen, and I think I've always been patient with those sort of things, and so we'll see what happens. In my hardest moments, what I'll say often is that it's not a book for weaklings, And what I mean by that is, it's not a book, and I don't mean that harshly on any kind of reader, but it's not, if you're in the mood just to read something that's very light, and you just want to read something and read it and then it's finished, then it's not the book for you at that moment. It requires some attention. At the same time, I also don't think it's Ulysses or Tolstoy. So I just think it doesn't use high-end vocabulary, or it doesn't use. It's not. I've never tried to be an intellectual, but I want to have a kind of emotional intelligence in a book, and I think in this case, and a kind of environmental intelligence as well, like in this book, where you need to pay attention to what is happening and to what sort of objects have been placed in front of you, because every object actually has a meaning. It's impossible to not change over that period of time, and for me as well, like when The Book Thief was published, I didn't have children. Now I have a 13-year-old daughter, and a 9-year-old son. And sometimes I say, that's why it took me 13 years to write the book. But that's really not true. And so I've always had a really positive idea of what books have given me. And, as I said, I love films, but to me, the difference between a movie and a book is that a movie or TV series now, you get to see the characters, but when you read the book, you get to become the characters, and that's what I think reading gives us more than any other medium. You get to really become somebody else for a moment and believe it.